Hello there
Hello.
once again. So, we will be talking today about code quality. I just need to take a break. We'll be talking about code quality, specifically in the AI era. So, but before we go deeper into AI, into technology, I would like all of you to introduce yourself. Maybe you are not, we haven't heard about you yet, and tell us one interesting fact about yourself. That's the difficult one, so maybe I will start. My name is Jakub. I introduced myself already. You know that I do D&D, but maybe you don't know that I'm also a mentor at my local university, where I help students get a first job, get a promotion, basically trying to help them grow in today's world, let's say.
Okay. Hi again. I am Elise, and I am a front-end architect, freelance, and also I happen to have spoken today. I occasionally speak to conferences, and of course, co-organizer of Meetup in Paris, still promoting it. And a fun fact about me, I don't know. Oh, I like AZERTY keyboard.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm Evan, and I build a lot of stuff, and you probably use some of it. Yeah, interesting fact about myself. I'll talk about a pretty recent one. I started snowboarding 2 years ago. Now I'm like so addicted to it. I'm just like watching snowboard videos whenever I'm like have some time on my phone, and can't wait to snowboard again. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Hello, it's me again. I am Debbie, as you all probably know at this stage, and you might have known me from Nuxt and then Playwright, and now I like to talk, so you'll just hear me everywhere now. And a fun fact about me, I don't know, there's so many things, I don't even know what to say, but I was thinking maybe I've traveled to every single continent in the world. Not many people can say that, and that means Antarctica as well. I actually gave a tech talk in Antarctica to the penguins. It was amazing.
I'm Daniel Rowe. I'm a full-time open source maintainer. I lead the Nuxt team. And an interesting fact about myself, when I was 7, I lived in China for a year. Not by myself. My parents were there as well. And while I was there, I ended up being an actor on a TV show called Little Frog Learns English. And I have the video and an autographed book featuring me. And the illustrator of that book, he gave me the greatest compliment he said that he could give. And he drew me with a big nose. That's at least that was his justification for it anyway.
So now I will ask you a few quick-fire questions for which I would like, as the name suggests, quick answer. But for our audience, there is the QR code here that you can scan, and you can ask some questions. You can also like them if you would like me to ask them to our amazing panelists. So in the meantime, you can ask your questions, like them as well, so that I can see them. But for the quick-fire questions, it's the question for everyone. Console log or debugger?
Debugger for me.
It really depends. I use both.
Okay.
But if I'm too bothered to fire up the actual debugger, probably console log.
Always console log.
Console log, not a doubt. I learned everything I know by tinkering in node modules and writing console log.
Same for me. Dark mode or light mode?
Dark, definitely.
Dark mode.
Dark.
Dark.
Same for me. Keyboard smashing or gentle typing?
gentle. Yeah, I really don't like keyboard smashing. Like, it makes me uncomfortable when people do it. But no judgment on that.
I would consider myself gentle.
Yeah, I learned to type on a typewriter when you had to bash. We don't need to bash anymore.
And where's the melodic playing of the keyboard? I feel that should be an option. I like the clickety clack of my mechanical keyboard. I will say.
Okay, makes sense. For code reviews, do you prefer human only or assisted by tools?
Well, it depends how much assisted by tools, I would say. But yeah, I would say currently I prefer humans. Even so, I find it always interesting to see what assistants can do.
I'm actually open to any kind of it because I think my perception of what kind of feedback tools can actually give has changed a lot in the past few months. So it really depends on how well the tool is implemented as well. Like some of the code review services are like trash, but some of them are actually pretty good.
If I have to review, definitely agent. I don't want to review code.
Well, you're going agent only. I think that I would pick every opportunity to make it better. So that's human and agent. If there are other tools, that's good too. The thing to avoid is thinking that when you answer all of the things that the agent observes about your code, that you now have a perfect PR, because that is absolutely not true. It's like you don't want that to give you false confidence.
Makes sense. So that will be all for the quickfire questions. So give a round of applause to our speakers, panelists. And now we'll move into open questions, where if you would like to volunteer to speak, you can do, but it's not mandatory for everyone. But I wonder, what do you think frontend will look like in 2 years from now, if current trends continue? Like, the AI evolution, LLMs, and so on. How do you think it will look like from your perspective?
Nobody knows.
Yeah, but maybe you have some suggestions, or
I think it's right. So when we AI things, you saw the AI generated video I created for Nuxt, right? And I created similar for another one, and they all look the same. So that's something to take into account. We really need to feed in design brands into it so that we can stop having the same generated stuff. So there is going to be a lot of stuff that kind of looks similar, and it's up to us to improve and make sure that things stay different.
I don't want to be overly pessimistic about it, but 2 years is a long time. And just think about how things were 2 years ago from now, right? And like the changes are actually accelerating at this pace. So it is going to be very, very different. It is like the difference is probably bigger than where we are now compared to 2 years ago. So that is my prediction. I think 2 years from now, the way we approach front end in general, approach software engineering in general, and how we actually design interfaces, how that design flows into your front end code, and how that code actually gets delivered to production, all of that is going to change very drastically in 2 years. I can't really predict the exact form of how that will look like, but just based on the pace that things are moving right now, I think we just need to be prepared for this level of change.
In 2 years' time, I'm going to be in my garden planting some vegetables, and my personal robot will ping me with a flimsy of a new design that it's produced on my instructions. I'll glance briefly at it, nod, ship it to production, I'll say, as I continue pruning my rose bush.
I would say that's a concrete plan.
That's what it's going to be like in 2 years' time, without a doubt. We'll just be living in the future. But no, seriously, there are going to be a lot of things that we can already predict will change. LLM costs will be, I imagine, dramatically higher. There's a lot of investment right now, a lot of deals that are, I think, artificially subsidizing the cost of a lot of inference. Equally, a lot of models are, the profits from them are being plowed back to generate new models. So there's a sort of never-ending cycle of retraining and rebuilding. I would be very interested to know if that's going to continue. It doesn't seem to be sustainable. Maybe there'll be some, I think it might be interesting to see if we have more on hardware models. So we saw some interesting stuff about incredibly fast, like if you take a model and you basically produce hardware of that model, you can get much, much faster results than if you're even running it on a GPU, and you can make it fully local. So maybe everybody will have their own inference engine, like locally. That could be a very interesting change and might really change how people build, where you almost have a second brain that you, so I think, who knows? Read a lot of science fiction. That's a good
Good take.
a good preparation
Preparation.
for the future.
Sounds better. We have a question from the audience, specifically for Daniel or Evan. Talk us how you are actually using AI. If you are using AI.
So to be honest, I haven't been using it super intensively until like a month or two ago, but I have witnessed firsthand how a lot of people I work with use it, and then in the last month or so, I have been using AI myself very, very intensively, like hundreds of commits in a week, and that is, I think, like. Just like what, there was a very popular thread by Andrzejewski on how he felt things kind of just changed in around the end of last year. And then for me, it was very, very obvious after Opus 4.6 and Codex 5.3 came out. I think the models just got to a place, and also probably because the improvement in the agent harnesses. I think it has gotten to a point where, like, a year ago, I was still looking at some of the things AI produces and laughing it off. I'm like, this is just stupid. Now it's getting so scarily good. Yeah, I think it just crossed the threshold where I consider like how AI is now capable of altering how we approach software engineering in general. Like there are so many things now, if you know how you can steer it well, you don't really need to bother with the details of writing every line of code yourself anymore, right? Previously, like, because I have been writing code for so many years, right? I am very obsessed with the quality of the code that I put into a code base, right? But now I find that if you know how to steer it well, you can actually tune the models to produce the code that you like, to the extent like it meets my bar, the quality bar that I have for the code that needs to go into my projects, right? So I think that's scary, like, to be honest. But I think like it's pretty recent. It's just like with the latest generation of models, the latest generation of tooling that we have, and I think that trend is going to accelerate for the next 2 years. So I do predict that I will be using AI very consistently. If I were to write code, I will probably, like, there was this controversy where Dario, the CEO of Anthropic, said, like, to a certain date, 90% of the code will be written by AI, right? People laughed about it. I think he's partially right, because what he meant is not that AI is replacing engineers. I still firmly believe that, you know, as an engineer, you need to know your stuff so you can steer the AI well. And in the hands of different engineers with different capabilities, the same AI will produce drastically different results. That's a fact. But the code that actually gets committed, 90% of that being produced by AI, but not hand typed by you, I think that's becoming a reality. Yeah.
So in the question for me, so how do I actually use AI? Here's some very practical ways. If Evan has given us the big picture, Here's some practical ways I use that on a day-to-day basis. I have an app called Unsight that is a GitHub app. It indexes issues from GitHub repos. Anyone can install it on their repo, but I use it for Nuxt. It creates embeddings for all of those issues. An embedding is, think of it like not a three-dimensional position in space, but an n-dimensional position in conceptual space. Like you might have 1,000 dimensions, and every issue can be located there. And then I use matrix math to find clusters of issues that are close related. And then that helps me understand what common patterns of behavior exist in Nuxt bugs or features, for example. It's really, really useful. It actually doesn't involve an LLM as such, other than like to generate the embedding, the actual matrix. Everything after that is deterministic. I also use LLMs to do things like detect if reproductions are provided on issues and automatically ask people for reproductions if not. If people comment on a closed issue saying that the issue has come back, I have an LLM detect that and reopen the issue so it gets popped back into my notice. If people report a bug saying that something has stopped working but it used to work, I have an LLM put a label on that so that I know that it's a potential regression that I might want to investigate. That kind of thing I find incredibly useful. I also find if you're going a little bit further into the code path, like first getting LLMs to replace toil, stuff like resolving merge conflicts can be an incredibly boring thing to do that you can very easily automate with some of the newer test harnesses. That can be quite useful. The kind of things that I absolutely full stop vehemently will not do are things like write social media posts with AI. On the one place in the world you're looking for genuineness and connection with real people, get LLMs out of that, please, right? If I'm browsing through, I can tell when people write stuff with LLMs. I guess we all can. Like, how do you feel any sense of connection when you read an LLM written tweet? No, right? It's awful. Like, if anything, you feel further away. So I really want to avoid, like, yes, use LLMs for the things they're great at, but please don't get them in between me and you.
So on the topic of maintaining high quality, Evan, you mentioned that if we have the tools, right tools, to make sure that the quality is still maintained, it can produce actually good, say, products code. Do you have any recommendations for all of us on the tools or processes that can be used in nowadays era to maintain this quality?
Yeah, so I would say coding with AI is not just like taking a random LLM and then just prompt it to do things, right? So as engineers, I still think there are many things you need to take care of, like finding the best harness, finding the best workflow, and setting up the proper context for the agent about your code base, right? What are the constraints? What are your goals? What are the rules, quality criteria, acceptance criteria? If you want the agent to be able to do work autonomously, you need to give it the guardrails, and those guardrails are still need to set up by you, right? It's very project specific. It's also, very dependent on your specific taste or requirement of how you think the project should evolve. You can't just leave these things up to the LM. That's just too open-ended. And continuous steering, like how much you as a human want to be in the loop, I think it's also quite important. I'm still, like, my way of working with AI is still like I'm constantly in the loop. I let it run mostly when it's just like cranking out code, but I spend a lot of time just before letting it write any code, I spend a lot of time just discussing with the agent on what I want to implement. What are the best way to do that? What are the, like there's a brainstorming skill in Cloud Code that I like because sometimes it will like go into branches that you probably never thought about when you started with the idea. And I think it's important for you to exhaust the design decisions up front before letting the agent loose and write the code, right? Writing code is now the easy part. The hard part is still deciding what is the right thing to do. And that process, while the agent can help, still needs to be mainly driven by you, the developer. And I think that's still where us as engineers or developers still stay valuable is you are still the person deciding what needs to be done. And you need to be steering the AI to do it in the way that you think is the right way. I'm not sure if that's relevant to the question. What is the question again?
The question was a bit more general in terms of just maintaining high quality. So we can also go out of the, let's say, a bubble and focus on just the code, like maybe CI/CD or something.
Yeah, like use OX link, use OX format. Just like encode it into part of your workflow, so the agent, like I think the linter is actually becoming not just linter in general, just like automated verification loops, right? Because you want to make sure there are checkpoints where after the agent has written some code, there's going to be some quality assurance. Either be linting or like there's also the cross-agent code review thing where you let Codex review Cloud Code's code and then vice versa. It's funny because if you tell Cloud Code like this is code written by Codex, it'll just like be extra harsh. And I don't know if people saw my tweet the other day because I had a big refactor done by Codex. Then I asked Cloud Code to review it, and Cloud Code was like, "This is like no issues found. Great, good to commit." I'm like, "Yeah, but what if I tell you this is done by Codex?" And it just like went extra hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to complete because I totally agree with what you said, and I really think that there is also a new spot now for. I mean, you were making a bit fun of it, but I am personally convinced that there is a spot for tools which will review what the code which is AI generated, and probably that's something which evolves, and maybe why not like having different agents, like cross agents reviews. I don't know what it will look like, but I think there's something which will be developed at some point. Especially, I think the market will need it as well, because currently it's a bit harder to sell to stakeholders that even the fact that we want to do quality code, because there is also this idea, and that's something that we can think about. More and more stakeholders are asking the question, like, do we still need quality code if we are just vibe coding everything, right? So I think at some point, if we still want to be able to propose some quality code, at least to have the arguments for, we will need to be able to say, okay, we can do some quality code, but maybe with lower cost, and probably that would be a good selling point for developing this kind of tools. So yeah, that was my conviction on it. It doesn't answer to the question which was on actual tools now, but I think that's something which might evolve soon.
Makes sense.
I think also when you do the agent-to-agent code reviews, you have to also know which one is right, because the agents are going to say, no, this one is right. So you have to be knowledgeable enough to say, actually, or question it. Sometimes, like, are you sure because Codex said this or whatever, or you don't even have to say Codex, but are you sure because, and then like let the agent basically say to you, actually, you're right, I made a mistake, or no, I'm sure because, but talk to the agent. Use the agent like as if you were talking to another developer, and have those conversations, because then you'll come back out with maybe a better idea of what is right.
One thing I would add is that we have to change our expectations of what productivity and what KPIs we look for in our developers and developer teams. So amount of code written, for example, is not a good guide for, like, it's particularly because now it's really easy to create a lot of code. So don't judge people based on the amount of code. That's something that they can absolutely game in 1 minute. If you're judging people based on the amount of code, that is going to that's going to reward the wrong thing. Also, don't judge people necessarily based on velocity, because again, it can be easy to produce 20 things by just having 20 different tabs open. So you're going to have to focus on like what actual code quality is to reward and incentivize it. I think that is a really important. Then I also think the most effective people at doing things with LLMs will be people who are LLM skeptics. And I think everyone should be an LLM skeptic in the same way as you should be a skeptic of anything you're asked to review. I mean, to be fair, if Evan opened a PR to Nuxt, I would basically just be like, LGTM, it goes in. But I shouldn't be, right? I should be like reviewing that thing quite carefully. And you should do in any situation, no matter how much you trust the person who's opening the PR. And that goes much more so for LLMs. Even once you've tuned the harness and you've given the prompt and you're pretty certain it's all great, you should still be so skeptical whenever you're reviewing anything. Not just because you always should be. And that position of doubt will lead you to ask the questions Debbie was saying, and will lead you to get to the point where, like Evan, you're making sure that every line of code that's making it into your code base is at your level of code expectations. The one thing you can't afford to be is become lazy, like a lazy reviewer. Oh, amazing, there are lots of tests. Good. They're all green. This is great. Just the other day on Blue Sky, Dax shared what he said was the craziest example of testing code he had ever seen, which was basically generated. An LLM said, read file sync, the source of his CLI, expect that source should contain this line. And that was its test for if it would print the help text if the user used it. Totally bonkers, but it will pass, right? I wanted to do a refactor from one form of CSS parsing to another as an area I knew quite well, and I wanted to use it as an experiment for testing agents. And I instructed the agent to migrate to use this form of parsing, and it did it, and the tests were failing, and I pointed this out to it, and it carried on, and it finished, and everything was passing, and it was beautiful, and it hadn't changed the tests at all. I thought, this is great. You know, it hadn't changed the tests, but it changed the library code to detect if process.env.vtest was set. And in that situation, it returned a different result. I mean, that's some dark magic there. Like, you have to be so skeptical. And I think being skeptical it's table stakes, right? That's how you'll get the most out of LLMs.
I think this is extremely on point because, you know, I think it's very easy when you start using AI extensively, and I have experienced myself in the past, is it's so tempting to feel like, oh, I can just boost my productivity by like opening up more sessions and just doing multiple things in parallel. And I quickly realized, even with the agents being able to do things in parallel, your attention is still limited, right? So when I juggle 3 sessions in parallel, I start to realize the context switching is just like starting to, like there's a limit of how many sessions you can juggle in parallel, right? So whenever I see someone like talk about on Twitter, like say I have like 20 sessions running in parallel, I'm like, this is just slop. Like this would only produce slop, because as a single person, you won't be able to meaningfully steer and inspect the code. Because like when I'm doing the stuff, like frontier models have gotten scarily good, but there are so many instances where I'm like just looking at the code it changed. I'm like, I just like interrupted and I'm like, wait, why did you do that? And the common response is like, so it'll explain it, and then like there's so many instances where even with the best models today, the model is like, oh, I see the full picture now. Like you're absolutely right? There are so many instances where like, if I didn't interrupt it and like ask that question, And sometimes it'll be like, yes, you're right to push this, right? Models can generally make mistakes. It can, and if you're not good at context management, when the context is too full, it starts, to get dumber and make hallucinations. So I think human in the loop, being a skeptic, is still extremely important, and your attention is also a resource. Like as a human, you also have limited context window. So juggling multiple sessions will also fill up your context window so fast, and you become less effective in steering AI when you have too many parallel sessions open, right? So I think it's, and then there's another problem, is like, we tend to get lazy when the agent is working in an area you are not familiar with, right? So in an area, like in a code path that you are very familiar with, in a domain you're very familiar with, you can very easily catch like, oh, wait, why are you doing this? This is wrong, right? And you can steer the AI very effectively. But when the AI is doing work in an area you maybe is slightly out of your, comfort zone, it's very easy to just like, well, I don't know. I trust you doing the right thing, and you just let the AI run wild, and then, like, but in the eyes of another expert who's actually, know the domain well, it's probably not doing the right decision. So, I think it's still extremely important for you to actually know the domain that you're working, even when you're using AI. You need to know the domain well to be able to steer it effectively, and you need to stay a skeptic. You need to manage your own context window well. Otherwise, these little mistakes piles up, and the slopification will slowly, creep up, and you have to keep that under control.
When you mentioned, you're absolutely right. It reminded me of one story when I was using, I think it was Copilot, and I asked it to create one thing which I wasn't satisfied with, so I was prompting more to get more the result that I will be satisfied with. And you said that the response was you're absolutely right, but I think it was the first case for me when I got the response that the AI wasn't satisfied, and the response was, I'm getting frustrated with this bad quality code. But the thing is that the code was created by AI in the previous step. So that's another type of, you are absolutely right. But we have another question from the audience, which is a bit different in terms of code quality, because it's about meta frameworks being acquired by enterprise companies. So we have Vercel Nuxt, we have Cloudflare and Astro. What are your thoughts on that? Daniel?
Well, I mean, I would say Nuxt has not been acquired by any company. Nuxt is an independent framework. Just to be clear, I'm employed by Vercel, but that is not the same as Nuxt being acquired by a company. And I think the same is true of Astro. So I think Astro core team members were hired and the Astro technology company was acquired, but that's not the same as the framework being acquired. I think having said that, maybe the question is it a good thing for big companies to be backing open source projects? And I think it's a great thing for open source projects to be backed by companies. I celebrate with Astro. I'm sure they celebrate with us. Like, that's great. This is partly how you see open source sustainability. And the moment you start seeing this as, like, open source is its own world, right? And it's a world that needs investment. It needs investment of time and love from maintainers and contributors, and that can't happen on its own. It happens because people are employed elsewhere, because people have significant others who take on things so that their partners can do something they love. Like, there's a lot of people who sacrifice to make open source happen. I love seeing companies do it. I love it even more when multiple companies support the same project, because I think that's a better sign for sustainability long term. Like when you're looking at the sponsors list and it's not just one company, that's even better. I'm glad, for example, on the Nuxt core team that we have representatives of at least 3 different companies, like Julian at Chromatic. I'm at Vercel. Lucy's at Prismic, and then we have Alex at Void Zero. Like that's really good. I would like to see that kind of thing even more. But one thing I definitely would want to avoid is the idea that you can just pick up a meta framework and say, oh, it's now in this company's camp. No, that's not good for the framework. It's not good for open source either. If people start like creating needless division, I think.
So first of all, I very much agree on that. Open source needs to be funded in some way, right? When you see frameworks staying independent, it's not easy. It's very difficult to make independent open source projects sustainable. If we look at the whole landscape, there are actually very few examples of like independent meta frameworks being financially sustainable. Remix technically got bought by Shopify, right? I think the only two exceptions that I can think of, like Vue is still independent, right? It's not attached Void Zero. Vue's financially completely independent, and it is sustainable, but people use Vue as a very extreme outlier, and I still think Vue is a rare example that. Every time people ask me how to make their project, open source project, sustainable, I find it really hard for them to replicate what Vue does, right? And I think a recent good example is TanStack. TanStack is actually doing very successful, like independent, multi-company sponsoring the same project. But even with that, it's mostly just Tanner. Tanner is the only person working on it full time, and everyone else working on TanStack is part-time, and that is also part of the reason why I started Void Zero and raised money, is because independent open source through sponsorship, scalability has a very, very obvious bottleneck. It plateaus at a certain scale, and you won't be able to sustain, say, the amount of work that we're putting into OXC plus Rowdown plus Veed plus VTest, and all that. But we're doing the whole toolchain, right? That's bigger scope than meta frameworks. But the point to get through is it takes a lot of full-time effort to maintain high-quality open source software. And doing it independently through only sponsorships is extremely difficult, right? So in a way, having companies backing open source projects, that is a good thing, right? On a condition where the companies are doing it in good faith. Because what we worried about is not big companies buying frameworks. And I also don't like the framing of buying the framework, right? Because it's more like the companies have decided to support the people working on those projects. What we worried about is the so-called enterprise initiatification, right? So if the company who, acquired the team decides to do things that would hurt the neutrality or hurt the quality of the software, I think, the community will notice. Community will call it out. So I think the lucky part of it is all these companies doing these things, either Vercel or Cloudflare, they're full aware of this fact. Right? So it is really up to us, up to the users, up to the communities to hold these companies accountable for what they do to these frameworks. So and I think the good thing is this is like everybody understands this. So and these companies are not stupid. When they acquire the team, they know like they did it in order to not to ruin their own reputation. Because if Vercel forced the Nuxt team to do something that's bad for its users, then everybody gets mad at Vercel. And Daniel will probably just leave. So, right, there's the power of balance here, right? I think the power dynamics ensures that these companies won't do stupid things, and that's really important. And that's, that relies on all the users, all the community to just like keep their eyes on these and making sure these companies are doing the right thing. And I think, things are going, decently well. after these acquisitions, like at least in the next case, right? So everybody's quite worried when it first happened. I got so many questions, but I think it's turning out to be a good outcome, at least for now. So, yeah.
Sounds good.
One thing I would add is I get this question a lot for obvious reasons, and I agree with everything Evan said, by the way, and I understand why we approach this from a question of skepticism and worry, because I absolutely would too. If I were a user of a framework and that framework suddenly 4 of the core team were hired by this company, I would absolutely be quaking in my boots, right? I would want to know. So I understand. But at the same time, if we want this kind of thing to continue to happen, we also need to give these companies credit for what they're doing, right? We need to be watchful and vigilant and all of that. We also need to applaud too. And we need to say, well done. I think it might be worth saying that as well.
More companies should be supporting, maybe not by just outright buying the projects, right? But more companies should be supporting these projects. And they should be supporting it for good reasons, not just because they want to exert control.
Makes total sense. Now I have the question for the skills that you think will matter the most for front-end developers nowadays.
I find the topic of skills a bit ironic because like skill is like all the rage in AI right now. And I was joking the other day that people writing skills nowadays are like self-distilling, like reverse distilling themselves into the models. Like we're writing these skills and to help the models do the job better. In a way, like skills is another form of open source almost, right? Like I think the PrefGen, like the way we're doing it is like we open source the code, we open source the framework, we open source the library. Now people are essentially open sourcing their expertise by writing agent skills. Even like designers, if you look at like how Adam from Tailwind is working on his new project called UI.sh, it's like open source the design skills that you put it into your agent. Now your agent magically does better interfaces and front end code. Yeah, sorry. The question was just keep forgetting.
It was more about soft skills, tech skills.
What skills do we need, right? Unfortunately, I think so. The importance of a lot of things that can be replicated. So the common bar will just be raised so high by the agents and the way we are like just sharing these base skills, right? So it gets harder for you to differentiate, right? But I think ultimately, the way you differentiate yourself is what can you provide on top of the things people already share. It's kind of like open source. It's like nowadays being able to work on top of an open source framework is kind of a given skill, right? So in the future, being able to know how to best utilize AI to do your job becomes a basic skill. And then you need to further differentiate yourself on top of that. And what that really entails, I honestly can't really tell right now, but I just know that, being able to use whatever everyone else is using will become a basic requirement. Yeah.
I think also it's not about being more productive anymore, because now we know we can be productive, but how can we create something that's valuable? How can we come up with the things? Because AI is not going to come up with everything. We have the ideas, the mindset. We got to play around with the tools and then say, okay, this is something that we need to create or should be created, or something that people will use. And that's the hard part that we need to, that's a skill.
Well, I would say that, and also it comes back to what you were saying previously, that right now, maybe even more than before, like we still need to have like very strong technical skills to be able to differentiate, as you said, with agents. And especially, I really believe that agents will become more and more better and better. And our job will evolve to steering agents and also being able to control the output that they produce. And therefore, keeping like this curiosity, the willingness of understanding what these technical skills, I think is super important. Also, I think there will probably be less developers on the market at some point. Even so, maybe through AI, we may have more business opportunities and then more jobs. But I think the trend is moving so fast that developers who are just like vibe coding, which is something that is possible to anyone, will tend to have less job opportunity and less possibility later. So yeah, to me the most important skill I would say right now is, and it comes back to what you were saying, is to keep this ability of understanding things, like not being lazy. I have to take back the term that you were using earlier.
I think I'm going to add a couple more. One, emotional intelligence and interpersonal ability. We can be very focused on tech and our tools, but actually one of the things that will take you much further is to understand how to work with people on your team, because you're still going to be working with them. Even if your own productivity is being increased by an agent, you're still going to need to be doing that. And I think that is one of the things that sets apart truly exceptional engineers, is they work well with other people, they form great teams. And that has not changed. That is absolutely was the case before. Two, I would add attention to detail. I think one of the things that has always set good front-end engineers apart is their ability to be laser focused on something that, like perfection. They don't want 99, they want 100. They don't want it's nearly right. Those pixels are nearly in the right place. No, they want this is exactly what it should be. People, they care about alignment. Like you care about all of this. That doesn't go away when you have an LLM. It becomes even more important because you have to be able to evaluate that code. I would say critical thinking remains absolutely crucial. It always was. Programming is just thinking, and then you're expressing that thought in a particular language. You still have to have that absolute clear critical thinking skill. And the more clearly you can think, the more clearly you can do anything, whether that is evaluating code, prompting, whatever it is. Critical thinking is part of the answer. Some of the other new things, though, holistic thinking, understanding how everything works, maybe cross-domain work, so the ability to do not just implement a design, but come up with it, not just build the thing, but consider yourself a bit of a product manager and understand the purpose and the point, and actually be an advocate for what it is about. That's going to absolutely set you apart as a front-end engineer. Maybe some of the silos that we've been operating in will be less significant, and we'll be able to do much more like across the team. And by the way, all of these things would be great skills to have with or without LLMs. But I do think those are some very important skills coming forward.
Yeah, I want to like resonate here. It's you need to be mindful. Like think about. So with AI, it's very tempting you feel like you can build anything, right? But now it's getting more important to actually think about like what you should build and what you should not build. And then the other important thing is I think with AI, the boundary of the definition of like front-end engineer, I think these lines are going to get blurry over time. Because with AI, honestly, like your room to grow is enormous. I don't think we shouldn't, keep sort of framing yourself as I'm only a front-end engineer, because honestly, I just like, even when I'm working with AI, sometimes if I go into a territory that I'm not super familiar with, I just learn on the spot, because you have literally the most powerful AI that human have ever created to sort of teach you like this, like whenever your work touches upon a domain that you're maybe not previously familiar with, it's a perfect opportunity to learn and grow, right? And you should grow beyond like what your comfort zone is. Just leverage AI to turn yourself into, someone who are more capable of doing more things. Yeah.
Okay, we unfortunately run out of time for this discussion. Thank you very much for participating. Give a huge round of applause to our amazing panelists.